Did you know Subway has been a family-owned business for almost 60 years? Now Subway just sold for $9.6 billion, which is crazy because think about it. When was the last time that you ate at Subway? No, seriously. When was the last time you ate at Subway? I'm genuinely curious. The best answer gets $100. Now, after 6 months of trying to sell itself at $10 billion, an 800-pound gorilla has stepped up to buy the sandwich chain. And when I found out about this, the same questions popped up in my head that you're probably thinking right now. Number one, who the heck has $10 billion to buy Subway? Number two, how are they even worth $10 billion? When I haven't eaten there in years. It seems like they're a dying brand. So in this video, I'll answer those questions. And as a bonus, I'll show you how you can copy some of Subway's billion-dollar strategies. Okay, now here's the thing. A massive part of Subway's success was due to the business model that they used. And without this specific business model, Subway as we know it probably would not exist. Now, before we unpack that, let's bring it back to how Subway even got their start. Imagine this, you're getting ready to go to college and you need help paying your tuition. You borrow $1,000 from a family friend and you turn it into $9.6 billion. Now, look, that's the shortened and glamorous version, but in 1965, Subway was founded by Fred DeLuca, who at the time was a college student just trying to pay for school. His family friend, Peter Buck, loaned him $1,000. At the time, Fred was only 17 years old. Can you believe that? 17? So this leads to billion-dollar business lesson number one. There's a phrase people say, if you find the deal, you'll find the money. Now, don't let a lack of money hold you back. With an idea and resourcefulness, whatever dream or business idea that you have, you can make it happen. Fred and Peter originally named the company Pete Super Submarines. Corny, I know. What's funny is that people often misheard the name as Pizza Marines, which led them to rename it to Pete's Subway, and then in 1968, they chopped off the Pete's and just went by Subway. Now, a lot of people say not to do business with family, but it seemed to work out for Fred. Early on, his mother ran the first store, and his sister worked there as a sandwich artist. But here's what's fascinating. Fred and Pete would have meetings at Fred's house about how the first store sales were actually declining. Despite that, they decided to open a second location purely to create the image of success. That takes some balls.
It's really beyond words.
And then soon after that, they opened their third location. So it just shows, don't give up at the first sign of failure if you're getting a slower start. But here's where their biggest decision and secret behind their growth came in. In 1974, Subway decided to franchise their business. They had a goal of getting to 32 stores, and they figured franchising could help them do it and open stores farther away from home. And if you aren't familiar, franchising is basically allowing someone else the rights to operate and use all of your intellectual property, your logo, your name, business systems, etc. Think Ace Hardware, Pods, Jiffy Lube, McDonald's, Taco Bell. And this leads to billion-dollar lesson number two is to use a proven blueprint. In business, you can model, aka copy what's working. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Without leveraging the franchise model, it would have been really hard for Subway to grow corporately without independent owners and operators. I call franchising a business in a box. You get all of the tools and pieces packaged up for you. And after 9 failed businesses myself, that's how I got my first win in business. I bought a franchise and scaled to multiple locations. I didn't have to figure it all out. I just followed the system. But back to Subway. Only 8 years later, in 1974, Subway soared to 200 locations with a goal to get to 5,000 by 1994. They hit that goal 4 years early in 1990. And part of their fast growth was they had a low franchise fee of just $5,000. Now that only gave owners the rights to open a store. They still had to get the money to actually build and construct the store. But I'll tell you what, Subway was smart. They offered cash incentives to get franchisees to keep opening new stores. It's something that I heard Firehouse Subs is doing right now. From an inside source, I found out that Firehouse Sub is offering some of their franchisees $100,000 per location to continue to open up stores. Sounds like they're modeling what Subway did. And by the way, franchisees is just another name for franchise owners. But there wasn't a lack of controversy for Subway along the way. With Fred being so focused on growth for the sake of growth, he had a anywhere and everywhere mentality. Subway allowed franchisees to open stores in gas stations, convenience stores, truck stops, you name it. And at some point, the franchisees started to complain that stores were opening up too close to each other, meaning they were taking away sales from each other, which is not a good thing. I personally think it's part of the reason why the average Subway store generates such low sales. According to estimates, they only average about $400,000 a year in sales. It's really not a lot when you compare them to a Jersey Mike's with an average sales of about $1.1 million per location, and Firehouse Subs with an average of about $891,000 per location. But despite the low sales and stores opening up on top of each other, Subway exploded with over 37,000 locations in over 100 countries. But in the last 10 years, they've been on a downward trend. In 2016, something really shocking happened that hadn't occurred in all the years that Subway had been in business. It was the first year that Subway had closed more stores than it opened. They went from over 27,000 stores in 2015 to just about 20,000 stores. That means 1 out of every 4 Subway had closed down since 2015. Guys, that's over 900 stores closing every year. And because of that, sales in the US have dropped from their peak of $12.3 billion in 2013 to just $9.7 billion in 2022. That's a 20% drop. That's a huge deal.
Now that's a lot of damage.
In more relatable terms, imagine you're making $75,000 a year, and now your income goes to $60,000. Not fun. Which brings us to today. After nearly 60 years, the families finally put the business back up for sale in February of 2023. Now, what happened next is every business owner's dream. Several private equity firms started chomping at the bit, fighting to offer the best deal. Now, the family's initial hope was to sell for $10 billion, considering the strong brand name, explosive international growth, and just the overall profitability of the franchise system. However, Roark Capital, the winning private equity firm, ultimately came in at a $9.6 billion valuation. And look, that's cool and all, but who the heck is Roark Capital? Well, this is interesting. Roark Capital is a private equity firm with around $37 billion in assets under management. In simple terms, Roark focuses on buying majority shares in companies using borrowed money. They specialize in investing and buying franchise brands with proven systems. The firm was founded in 2001, and since then, Roark has dominated the market, acquiring companies like Inspire Brands. Who's Inspire Brands? Well, they're a holding company that owns Arby's, Baskin-Robbins, Dunkin' Donuts, Jimmy John's, Sonics, and B-Dubs. That's what cool people call Buffalo Wild Wings. And did you realize that all of those companies that I just mentioned are actually franchises? What? Don't feel bad. Most people don't, and a couple of years ago, I didn't either. Quick side note. Besides it being a business in a box, this is one of the reasons why I say that franchising is the most proven business model in history. Because there are over 4,000 franchise brands in every single industry you can imagine. Most people think of food, but think like Jiffy Lubes, Pods, Ace Hardware, Remax, UPS Store, Anytime Fitness. They're all franchises. I could literally keep going for an hour. And this leads to billion-dollar business lesson number 3. Most people think about buying a franchise, but another strategy is to franchise a business and become the franchisor and then get people to buy your franchise. And look, this is all going to make sense in a minute to how it all ties into Roark Capital buying Subway. But outside of Inspire Brands, Roark owns or has major investments in a ton of other companies. So they own Meineke, Anytime Fitness, Cheesecake Factory, Orange Theory, Sonic, Auntie Ian's, Jimmy John's, and even Two Men in a Truck. Plus their newest acquisition, Subway. Pretty crazy, right? Which brings us to the insane $9.6 million deal and why Subway was worth so much money. A lot of why they're worth so much money just comes down to the amount of money they make, duh, but more importantly, it's how they make their money. So Subway charges franchisees an 8% royalty on sales and a 4.5% advertising fee. So if you do the math, 8% royalty on an average $400,000 in sales per location, that's $32,000 per store on average that Subway is making. And if you multiply that just by the 20,000 stores in the US, they're making an estimated $640 million a year plus in sales. Even if they were just at a 20% profit margin, they'd be making $128 million a year in profit. Wow. Now, at the beginning of the video, I promised you I would show you why Subway sold for such a huge amount of money. Is it starting to make sense? Now you can see why all of these huge private equity companies were going in hard with huge numbers trying to win the bid. Now, Roark Capital beat out a bunch of other big-time private equity companies. And it's the way they did it that leads to billion-dollar business lesson number 4. Which you can use a similar strategy if you ever buy business yourself. It's called an earnout. An earnout is basically saying, hey, I'll buy your company for a specific amount of money, but only if the company keeps making that amount of money we think it will make in the next couple of years. So think about it like a performance bonus for the seller. And the seller only gets some of the money up front, and the rest they get over time as long as the business still performs well. So as an example, I buy your business for $1 million, but the only way I pay you the $1 million is if the business does a total of $5 million in sales over the next 2 years. If it doesn't, I only pay you $800,000. So I pay you the $800,000 now, and you'll only get the other $200,000 if the business hits that $5 million sales target. Pretty cool, right? So in order for the deal to be paid in full, Subway's cash flow would need to reach certain financial targets that extend over 2 years after the deal's closed. Now, if those numbers are not met, Subway only gets $8.5 billion instead of $9.5 billion. So Subway can't just relax, they need to step up and perform. So Subway's plan to catch up to competitors was a refresh of the menu, introducing a line of chef-developed sandwiches. The change momentum going into the purchase of the brand saw their store sales increase by 9%. It also had franchisees remodel 10,000 locations, and they spent $80 million providing 20,000 US restaurants with deli meat slicers. It's a new strategy to catch up to places like Jersey Mike's, who has been doing it for years. So there's still uncertainty as to whether the deal will reach its full $9.6 billion valuation, or if Subway will lose out on the earnout agreement and walk away with $8.5 billion instead of $9.5 billion. Either way, Not a bad chunk of change for the family of a 17-year-old kid who started out selling sandwiches. But look, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I recently broke down the controversy going on with F45 franchise that Mark Wahlberg is heavily involved in. And since you watch this, you'll probably find this F45 video fascinating as well. And if you want to learn more about franchising and how you can potentially benefit from this business in a box, then click the link below to grab some free resources that I have down below. I'll see you on the next one.